Anthony Albanese, welcome to the program. When did you first become aware of this allegation?
Well, there have been rumours around Parliament House for a considerable period of time, particularly around the Four Corners program, so I had heard rumours about it.
Penny Wong says she was first aware in November of 2019. Did she at any point pass this on to you?
No, Penny acted appropriately though. She provided support services to the woman involved. She checked that it had been reported to the police, as the woman said she would do. And then she also contacted the Adelaide police around the coronial inquiry that's taking place to offer her support and what she was told at the time.
And that's all fair enough, but do you think Penny Wong should have passed this on to either you or the Prime Minister?
Well, these were, of course, historical allegations, and Penny Wong, I think, acted appropriately.
What about the Prime Minister? He, along with Penny Wong and Sarah Hanson-Young, who received the letter and the documents that went with it, have all referred it to the Federal Police. Is that adequate? Has the Prime Minister done enough?
Well, the first thing that's got to be said here, David, is I do express sympathy for the family and friends of the woman involved. This is a tragedy, and the current debate and us discussing it would be adding to the hurt of those people. We need to make sure that these are serious allegations, that they're investigated appropriately, and that these issues aren't politically managed. This is a real test, and the Prime Minister must confirm to himself that it remains the case that the Minister, who's the subject of these allegations, that it's appropriate for him to stay in his current position.
How does the Prime Minister do that?
Well, of course, firstly, it is appropriate they be investigated by the authorities, but this now will be very much a dark cloud over the Parliament and over the Cabinet. The Prime Minister, it's his responsibility. He appoints, solely appoints the Cabinet. He must assure himself that it's appropriate, that the current position, makeup of the Cabinet can continue. That really is a matter for him. I'm not aware of all of these details clearly, David, that have now come to light in the last couple of days.
But when you say he needs to satisfy himself that this Cabinet Minister, the subject of this allegation, deserves to be in Cabinet, are you supporting the Greens in suggesting there needs to be some sort of independent investigation called by the Prime Minister here?
Now, I'm saying it's a matter for the Prime Minister. It's not. I don't seek to politicise this issue, David. What I say is that the Prime Minister must satisfy himself that the current circumstances are appropriate.
But aren't the police the best to look into any of this?
And I said that, David, but I made that clear. But then also, the Prime Minister will be in a position to make determinations, and that is a matter for him.
But how? By weighing evidence himself?
That's a matter for him, David. That's the point.
Right.
I'm not trying to politicise this. I'm not trying to second guess what response he has. But he is in charge of the Cabinet. This is a moment whereby Australians will be looking for, after what's been a very difficult fortnight, common decency to shine through here, and for an appropriate response that isn't about political management, that's about transparency, is about making sure that processes are respected. But then I think people will be looking for a resolution. And you'd be aware, David, that this can't just stay in the current position where it is. It will move on, and the Prime Minister will have decisions to make based upon his assessments.
Should he stand the Minister aside?
Well, that's a matter for him, David.
What do you think?
It's a matter for him. That's what I think. I think the Prime Minister's in charge of the Cabinet, and I think it is a matter for him to find out the details. Obviously, there will be an appropriate investigation of it once that's determined, because it will be difficult, David. That's the difficulty that we face here, is that the woman at the centre of these tragic circumstances has taken her own life.
But
that makes it very difficult.
But in terms of the standard you would adopt as leader, and do adopt as leader, if there were any sort of historical allegation like this, would you stand a frontbencher aside?
David, one of the things we're not dealing with here is hypotheticals.
No.
And with respect to you, the idea that you would bring out a hypothetical is, I don't think, appropriate. We have specific circumstances here. I'm not seeking to politicise this issue. I'm saying that the Prime Minister will have to make decisions based upon his own assessments.
Let's talk more about the bigger issue of the last couple of weeks, stemming from the Brittany Higgins case and the allegation that she was raped. It is still a little unclear what is going to change in Parliament House. How should allegations of rape or sexual assault against staff, against a member of Parliament, against others in the building, how should they be dealt with in your view?
Well, changing culture starts with accountability. And in Brittany Higgins' case, we have a circumstance whereby we know that three ministers at least, three cabinet ministers, at least four members of the Prime Minister's own staff. The AFP had, of course, informed ministers in the government of their investigations. We had journalists, including news.com.au and The Project, making inquiries to the Prime Minister's office. And it's beyond belief, frankly, that the Prime Minister knew nothing about this until it was revealed on Monday, and only after getting advice could respond on Tuesday morning. I find that quite extraordinary and not believable. So the first thing is we need accountability. But secondly, we need real change. We need to deal with the immediate circumstances, but real change means changes to the legislation, the Ministerial and Parliamentary Staff Act. We need to make sure there are proper processes for reporting, including the capacity to report issues independently at arm's length from the people who are responsible for managing offices. We need to make sure that support services are available. We need to make sure that training occurs of people who are in positions of authority. There needs to be a comprehensive change. The independent review needs to have very wide terms of reference to make sure that that can occur.
Just to be clear, pick up on something you said there, you do support an independent body to deal with complaints?
Absolutely. I think that's a very clear precondition that's required here. The idea, for example, the absurdity of Phil Gaetjens, the Prime Minister's former Chief of Staff, doing an investigation into what the Prime Minister's office knew internally, and then making it a cabinet in confidence document so that no one will ever know, a bit like sports rorts, what occurred with the same person being in charge of the review, is quite frankly absurd. I asked this week the Prime Minister, why don't you just ask your staff and then tell the Parliament?
Okay, well, yeah, the Gaetjens review is looking into who knew what and when in the Prime Minister's office, but just back on the point about dealing with complaints in the workplace of Parliament House, be they complaints of sexual harassment, sexual assault or something worse. If there is an independent body, should they be able to decide whether a staff member should go or not? Should that power be taken from the Member of Parliament?
We're not doing the inquiry here, David.
This is an important point about whether an independent body can do this.
That's exactly my point, David. We're not doing the inquiry here. This is too important. and we need to get it right. The terms of reference need to be broad, just as the Independent Parliamentary Expenses Authority has made a difference to the way it operates. The Parliamentary Budget Office has made a difference. It's one of the reasons why we need a National Integrity Commission that has real power and independence from its parliamentary masters. And one of the reasons why I'm not surprised, given sports rorts and all the other misuse of taxpayers' funds and processes, why the government continues to resist it, in spite of the fact it says it supported one way back in 2018.
Your Shadow Minister, Claire O'Neill, says solving this problem is going to take more than a new complaints mechanism. She says she's not heard a single instance of serious self-reflection from the nation's leaders about what they've done to create this culture. As she writes, this is, quote, a culture they as men preside over. They dominate almost all the critical positions of power and senior staffing roles. They strut the hallways, loll on couches, talk loudly, laugh raucously. Does Claire O'Neill have a point?
Of course, Claire O'Neill has a point in saying that patriarchy exists, and it exists also throughout all the structures in society. That's why we need real structural reform and change in the power structures in our society. It's not just a matter of saying that we need to respect each other. That's needed. Can I say this though, David? Half of my shadow cabinet are women. That makes a difference. It makes a difference. Labor is moving towards 50% representation. We're on 47. If we'd done better at the last election, we would have got there. We have very strong women in senior roles, but Penny Wong and Christina Keneally and Katie Gallagher and Tanya Plibersek and Claire herself. The idea that they're not playing a role in changing the culture is, I don't think, correct.
What about the former Labor MP, Emma Hussar? She's written an open letter this week saying the Labor Party have ridden their sanctimonious high horses like it's not happening on the Labor side. She says she was the victim of slut-shaming based on salacious reporting of maliciously leaked details of a Labor inquiry and then forced to resign. She says you met her in September 2019 and told her she deserved a full public apology. Is that right?
Well, David, I regret that Emma Hussar feels aggrieved, but I also regret that more than a dozen of her former staff in the one term in which she served in Parliament also feel aggrieved.
Did you tell her she deserved an apology?
David, I had a private conversation with Emma Hussar. After I became the leader, she asked to see me. There was an independent inquiry conducted by the New South Wales branch that found a range of issues with the management of her office. Did
you tell her she deserved an apology?
No, I am sympathetic towards Emma Hussar, who has had a very difficult period.
But you didn't tell her she deserved an apology?
She found that one term in Parliament very difficult, and there are a range of people, including more than a dozen staff and complaints that were dealt with at that time.
But you didn't tell her she deserved an apology?
David, we had a private discussion. Private discussions stay private.
All right. Let's turn to another big issue of the week, the Jobseeker rate. You've long argued the unemployed deserve more than $40 a day. Do you think $43.60 is enough?
Well, quite clearly, David, we did argue for an increase, and it's good that there's an increase, but this is very small. We won't, though, be in a position to stand in the way of that. We're not going to block any increase. What we say also is that it's not just about payments, it's also about issues such as support for housing. And one of the reasons why we were very concerned is that in the budget reply I raised as one of our policies that we should be putting more money into public and social housing, that would make a difference as well. I know it made a difference in my life, and it's regrettable that with $1 trillion of debt being run up by this government, there's not a single extra dollar has gone in that direction as well.
But just back on the Jobseeker rate though, Labor backed a Greens motion on Wednesday calling on the government to lift the rate at least to the poverty line. Is that where you think the rate should be?
Well, of course, we think that it's really tough to do it on $40 a day, and it'll still be tough to do it on $43 a day. We'd like to see a greater increase. But we're not in a position to do that. We'll be in a position to either block the increase, which will mean that the dollars stay where they are now. So I know that I've been contacted by some saying, block this increase. Quite frankly, I grew up in a household with a single mum on an invalid pension. There were just the two of us. I know the difference that every single dollar would make to people, and I'm not about to block an increase. I also note, David, that governments make budgets on an annual basis, and every single budget in a government that I lead would look at issues of poverty, would look at issues of how we can provide appropriate assistance, whether that be
This is a simple question, though. Should the unemployed be at least above the poverty line?
Well, everyone should be above the poverty line, David, but it's a matter of the specific circumstances in which you can do that.
But if you use the OECD's calculation, that works out at about $65 a day in Australia. Is that about right?
Well, it is disingenuous, David, to play games and to try to say, therefore, that we are in a position to do that from opposition. We're not. We'll be voting, we'll be certainly not blocking any increase, and we'll be making our decisions about what levels payments should be on, whether it be pensions or unemployment benefits or other payments, on an annual basis. That's what we'll do each and every year under a government that I lead.
Anthony Albanese, we will have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, David.